A Republican governor walked into the White House last week to repair a relationship that had publicly fallen apart. And the fact that this meeting happened the way it happened, and what it required from both sides to make it happen, tells you something important about how power actually works inside the Republican Party right now. The governor is Kevin Stitt of Oklahoma. The falling out was over a cabinet nomination. And the reconciliation, if that's what it truly is, says more about the current rules of Republican politics than almost anything else happening in Washington right now. Stay with this, because by the end you're going to understand something about the internal dynamics of Trump's Republican Party that most political coverage treats as gossip, but is actually a serious story about how loyalty, ambition, and power are being negotiated in real time. The insight at the center of this story is about what it costs a Republican politician to publicly break with Trump and what it takes to get back into the room. Here's the context that makes this story matter. Kevin Stitt is not a fringe figure. He's the governor of a deeply red state. Oklahoma went for Trump by massive margins. Stitt has positioned himself as a conservative reformer, a successful businessman turned politician who represents a modern version of Republican governance. He has national ambitions. His name has come up in discussions about Senate races, future presidential cycles, and yes, cabinet positions. He is exactly the kind of Republican politician whose relationship with Donald Trump is not just personally significant but professionally essential. In today's Republican Party, if you are a rising conservative politician with national ambitions, your relationship with Trump is arguably the single most important variable in your political future. That's not an overstatement. It's the operational reality of where the party is right now. So when Stitt and Trump had a very public falling out over a Department of Homeland Security nomination, it wasn't just a personal dispute between two politicians. It was a test case, a live demonstration of what happens when a Republican figure pushes back against Trump's preferences in a high-stakes appointment fight. And now that a reconciliation meeting has taken place at the White House, it's a test case of something else. What it looks like when that conflict gets resolved, who moves toward whom, and what the terms of repair look like in Trump's political world. Let's start with what actually happened. The dispute between Stitt and Trump centered on a DHS nomination. The Department of Homeland Security is one of the most consequential agencies in the current administration. It oversees immigration enforcement, border security, and a range of domestic security functions that are central to Trump's policy agenda. Who runs it, who holds key positions within it, matters enormously. Stitt had a candidate in mind, someone he supported for a position. The White House went in a different direction, and rather than quietly accepting that outcome as many governors in similar situations have done, Stitt made his frustration known. That kind of public friction with Trump carries real costs in today's Republican Party. Other Republican politicians noticed, donors noticed, and Trump himself noticed, which in this political environment is both the problem and, eventually, the path to resolution. The public nature of the disagreement is what made this particular story significant. Republican politicians who have private disagreements with Trump and keep them private rarely generate much coverage and rarely pay much of a political price. But Stitt's frustration became visible enough that it registered as a genuine rupture. And once a rupture is visible in Republican politics right now, it creates a set of dynamics that are difficult to manage. Other Republicans have to decide whether to distance themselves from the friction. Donors start asking questions, supporters start getting nervous, and the politician at the center of it has to make a decision about what to do next. But here's the part almost nobody is talking about. The decision Stitt made to seek a reconciliation meeting at the White House rather than let the distance grow is actually the most revealing part of this story. It tells you something about the realistic options available to a Republican politician who finds themselves in public conflict with Trump, because those options are more limited than people outside the party often appreciate. The path of doubling down on the disagreement, of building a public identity around independence from Trump, has been tried by multiple Republican politicians over the past several years. The results have been, to put it plainly, not good for most of them. Some have lost primaries. Some have chosen not to run again. Some have found that the donor networks and activist infrastructure of the Republican Party are so thoroughly oriented around Trump that operating outside his orbit is functionally very difficult at the national level. Stitt, who is an ambitious politician with his eye on the future, clearly assessed those options and decided that the better path was repair, not distance. That decision itself is worth understanding carefully because it's not just about Stitt. It's about the structural position that ambitious Republicans find themselves in right now. The calculus is not simply about personal loyalty to Trump as an individual. It's about the practical reality that the Republican primary electorate, the donor base, and the party infrastructure are all organized around Trump in ways that make political success within the party very difficult without his support, or at least without his neutrality. Now this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because the reconciliation meeting, while framed in public as a positive development, actually raises a question that doesn't get asked often enough about these kinds of situations. What did it actually require from Stitt to get back into the room? Reconciliation in politics is rarely symmetrical. When a subordinate figure, a governor, seeks reconciliation with a more powerful figure, the president, the terms of that reconciliation almost always require more movement from the subordinate than from the more powerful party. That's just how power dynamics work. So the question is, what did Stitt have to offer, signal, or concede to make this meeting happen and to have it come out as a positive story rather than a humiliating one? We don't know the full answer to that question. Private political negotiations don't get fully disclosed, but we can observe the public framing. The meeting was described positively by both sides. There were no reports of lingering grievances being aired publicly. The narrative that emerged was one of restored relationship, of two Republicans who had a difference of opinion working it out. That framing required both sides to agree to it, and for that framing to hold, Stitt almost certainly had to signal in some way that the public friction was behind him, that he was back in alignment. That whatever the disagreement was about, it wasn't worth the cost of sustained distance from the White House. For Trump's side, accepting the reconciliation and presenting it as a positive story serves its own purpose. It demonstrates that Republicans who stray can come back. It provides an off-ramp that makes the system work more smoothly. If the only outcome for Republicans who publicly disagree with Trump is permanent exile, the system becomes brittle. Some politicians will have nothing to lose by staying in opposition. But if there's a path back, and if that path requires visible repair rather than just quiet forgiveness, then it actually reinforces the power dynamic rather than undermining it. The existence of a reconciliation process is itself a tool of political management. And what happened next changed the entire calculation for how other Republican governors and politicians are watching this situation. Because Stitt's experience from public friction to White House meeting to restored relationship is now a data point. A case study. Other Republican politicians who find themselves in tension with the White House over appointments, policy disputes, or public statements are now looking at this sequence of events and drawing their own conclusions. Some will conclude that the Stitt path, public friction followed by reconciliation, is viable. Others will conclude that the cost of even getting to the point where reconciliation is necessary is too high, and they'll be more careful about letting disagreements become public in the first place. Either way, the dynamic has been demonstrated. Let's think about what this means for the broader landscape of Republican politics at the state level, because that's where a lot of the most important action in the party is happening right now. Governors occupy a unique position in the Republican political ecosystem. They have their own power bases. They run states, which means they have real executive authority, real budgets, real constituents who they answer to. They can't be dismissed as easily as a backbench member of Congress. At the same time, they need the support of the national party infrastructure for their own political futures, especially if they have ambitions beyond the governorship. This creates a tension that Stitt's situation illustrates clearly. A governor has enough independent standing to make a public disagreement with the White House possible in a way that, say, a first-term House member might not. But a governor who wants to remain a rising figure in national Republican politics can't sustain that disagreement indefinitely without paying a significant price. The middle path, which is roughly what Stitt appears to have taken, is to let the disagreement be visible enough that it registers, demonstrates some independence, and then engineer a resolution that allows both sides to move forward. Whether that path requires genuine compromise or mainly requires a willingness to perform reconciliation publicly is something only the people in those conversations know. For Oklahoma specifically, the practical stakes of the Stitt-Trump relationship are real. Federal funding, administrative cooperation, the alignment of federal enforcement priorities with state preferences on issues like immigration and energy policy, all of these things flow more smoothly when a governor has a functional working relationship with the White House. Oklahoma is a state where federal-state cooperation on energy development, tribal governance, and border security all have significant implications for the people who live there. Stitt's ability to deliver results for his constituents depends, in part, on his ability to work with the federal government. A sustained rupture with the Trump White House would have real costs that went beyond political optics. Now let's pull back and think about what this story means for the future of the Republican Party and American politics more broadly. The Stitt-Trump reconciliation is a small story in one sense. A governor and a president had a disagreement and worked it out. That happens in politics, but it's a window into something larger. The Republican Party under Trump's continued dominance is a party that has developed very specific rules about how political relationships work, how disagreements get managed, and what the costs and benefits of different kinds of behavior are. Those rules are not written down anywhere. They're demonstrated through cases like this one. They get absorbed by politicians, donors, and party operatives who are watching how things play out and adjusting their own behavior accordingly. What the Stitt case demonstrates is that the rules allow for some degree of public disagreement, but that disagreement has to be followed by visible repair. Simply going quiet after a public friction isn't enough. The reconciliation has to be performed, and it has to be performed in a way that makes the resolution clear to everyone who was watching the dispute. That's a specific and somewhat demanding political culture. It requires a degree of public humility from the party figure who initiated the friction, even when that figure may have had legitimate reasons for their disagreement. Whether that's a healthy dynamic for a major political party is a fair question. Healthy political parties generally benefit from some internal debate and disagreement. They develop better policies when competing perspectives are genuinely heard and considered. A party culture that punishes public disagreement too heavily tends to suppress the internal debate that helps parties adapt and improve over time. At the same time, a party that can't maintain any coherent direction because internal factions are constantly fighting publicly is also not functional. The question is where the right balance is, and whether the current Republican approach to managing internal disagreements is finding that balance. That's a question that the Republican Party as an institution is going to have to work out over the coming years, particularly as the Trump era eventually transitions into whatever comes after it. The politicians and operatives who are learning the rules of this political culture are going to be the ones who shape the party in the next phase. Whether they carry forward a culture of managed loyalty or whether they develop a different set of norms is genuinely uncertain. Here's the bigger picture that this whole story is actually pointing at. Kevin Stitt walked into the White House to repair a relationship because the costs of not doing so were too high. Donald Trump received that visit because accepting the repair serves the political system he's built. Both of those things make complete sense given the incentive structures of the current Republican Party. The story isn't about personal warmth or genuine ideological alignment being restored. It's about political professionals making rational calculations about what their respective situations require. That's politics. That's how it works in most times and places. The specific form it takes in the Trump era, the particular rules and rituals of loyalty and repair, is what makes this moment distinctive. Understanding those rules isn't just interesting for political junkies. It matters for anyone trying to understand where the Republican Party is going, who will lead it, and what kind of governing coalition it will be able to build over the next decade. The governors, senators, and House members who are navigating these dynamics right now are the future of the party. How they navigate them and what norms they internalize and eventually pass on will shape American politics long after the current moment has passed. If this kind of analysis is what you come here for, the best thing you can do is subscribe. This channel covers American politics without the noise and without the tribalism. Just clear, grounded analysis of what's actually happening and why it matters. Leave a comment with one question about Republican Party dynamics, gubernatorial politics, or what you think the Stitt-Trump reconciliation actually means. Those conversations are genuinely valuable. And if you know someone who follows politics closely and would find this useful, share the video. The more people who are thinking clearly about how power actually works, the better the political conversation gets.